Welcome to the Exploress, time traveling through women's history, one era at a time. I'm Kate Armstrong. Next month, we'll release our final Empress episode. Yes, I know, I said there'd only be 3 in this series, but I couldn't resist sneaking in one more. She's worth it, trust me. First, we're revisiting one of my favorite ruling ladies, the mighty Cleopatra. She didn't call herself an empress, but this living goddess most certainly ruled an ancient empire. To hold on to it, she had to tame one of the greatest empires of all, ancient Rome. This isn't just a re-release, though. Because I'm extra, I've re-recorded the 3-part original series, giving it a 2026 glow-up. And I've smooshed it into one big glitter bomb of an episode. You're welcome. Let's go traveling. But first, a quick shout out to some of my patrons. My newest pirate queens, Karen, Emily, and Lag. My warrior queens, Rachel, Alexis, Amanda, MCF, Kate, Amy, Ika, Jessie, June, Neve and Sloan, and Sarah. My newest boss lady, Marissa. My Imperial Empresses, Alyssa, Faye and Whimsy Soapworks, Letitia, Sally, Samara, and Teresa. And my Lady Pharaohs, Bridget, Cott, Kate, Kimberly, Laura, Sophie, and the fabulous Courtneys. Patrons are what fuels the Exploress. As an independent creator, I just couldn't do this show without them. For just a few dollars a month, they get all episodes early and ad-free. Hours of exclusive bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes peeks, the chance to become voice acting stars on the show, and the warm and fuzzy feeling of knowing they're helping to keep this show going. You can even try it out for free for 7 days. To find out more about it, just click on the link in my show notes. Cleopatra doesn't really need an introduction. You can see her in your mind already, can't you? Pretty and sultry with her cat-eye makeup, covered head to toe in gold. Extravagant, self-serving, ruthless, this epic seductress used every magic trick in her lady arsenal to hold on to her power, no matter the cost. At least, that's the Cleopatra the ancient Romans want us to see. Few women's stories have been more brutally revised by sexist haters threatened by a woman's right to rule. The Romans used her as a scapegoat to explain away 2 powerful Roman men's actions, because there's no way 2 top dogs like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony would have done the crazy things they did without her in the mix. Sure, let's chalk it all up to some sexy Egyptian sorcery. Most Roman writers take pains to make Cleopatra the villain. They really got out their hater brush for Cleopatra, running one of the ancient world's most effective smear campaigns. Where we might see an intelligent, savvy, thoughtful leader, ancient writers turned her into, as Cicero put it, an
uncommonly impertinent harlot.
Cassius Dio called her
a woman of insatiable sexuality and insatiable avarice.
Plutarch claimed she showed unseemly opulence. Flavius Josephus jumped right on that slut-shaming wagon and called her an
extravagant woman
who was
by nature very covetous
and
a slave to her lusts.
Roman poet Lucan, the drama queen, called her the shame of Egypt, the lascivious fury who was to become the bane of Rome. Greek writers supposedly called her Mariocane, which translates to something like she who gapes wide for 10,000 men. Rude. The themes here are clear. Cleopatra wanted too much, both in bed and in politics, and was way too greedy and emotionally volatile to be trusted with any real power. But clear away the acrid smoke of sexist Roman killjoys, and another picture starts to emerge. That of a deft and capable pharaoh who ruled one of the most powerful empires the ancient world would ever see. This last pharaoh of Egypt was dealt an impossible hand, and yet she stayed on top of the game for decades when lesser women and men would have crumbled. Temptress, witch, party girl, strategist, scholar, mother, ruler. Over the years, she's collected an impressive list of adjectives, her image fixed in our imaginations. But is that image nothing more than a fantasy? We have no idea what she looked like. We have next to nothing in her own words. In fact, only one can be credited to Cleopatra, though it's pretty fitting. In 33 BCE, either she or her scribe signed a royal decree with the Greek word
Ginistoi,
or
make it so.
We all know her name, but so much about her is a mystery. Who was Cleopatra beyond the smoke and hate and all that glitter? Grab your strappy sandals, some hot pink smoke bombs, and your shiniest diadem. Let's go traveling. Let's start around 69 BCE, around the time our Cleopatra is born. But first, let's hover over the Nile River Delta, right over the port city of Alexandria, and soak in the big picture. This soon-to-be queen comes into the world at the tail end of Egypt's majesty. We're more than 2,000 years past the construction of the Great Pyramids of Giza. It's been more than 1,000 since the last lady pharaoh we covered, Tuwosret, was rocking that crook and flail. And though Cleo is considered Egypt's last pharaoh, it turns out that in some ways she isn't Egyptian at all. Between the New Kingdom period, which started in the 16th century BCE and saw such lady greats as Nefertiti and Hatshepsut, who we covered back in Season 2, and 69 BCE, Lady Egypt was invaded and overrun by foreign powers, such as the Assyrians and Babylonians. It's been a rotating door of extremely bad dates. Then, finally, in swept Alexander the Great, that studly Macedonian god king who absolutely slayed when it came to dominating other empires. Alex is pretty famous for building the largest empire the ancient world would ever see and giving every Greek and Roman after him a very tiny man complex. And by the time Olympias' son arrived in Egypt on his steed in 332 BCE, the Egyptians were maybe almost excited to have him. I mean, at least he was acting like a proper pharaoh, and he wasn't Persian, so that was good. Let's declare him an Egyptian god and make him our pharaoh, why don't we? God status achieved, Alexander set about putting his personal stamp on this part of the Mediterranean. It was while trotting through Egypt to see an oracle in 331 that he had a vision of a great city that would link Greece and Egypt. It would be some 20 miles west of the Nile's opening, on a narrow spit of land jutting out between the sea and a lake. A canal dug to the Nile would provide fresh water and transport to the interior. He called it Alexandria, because he sure did love naming cities after himself. But then he died rather suddenly at the tender age of 32, and he didn't leave clear instructions about who should take over for him. So after some very tense skirmishing, his land was divvied up amongst his closest bros. Cassander got Macedonia and Greece, Lysimachus got Anatolia, and a guy named Ptolemy got Palestine, Cilicia, Petra, Cyprus, and, you guessed it, Egypt. This ancestor of Cleopatra's was actually a childhood friend of Alexander's, the son of a country squire and a princess. For a time, he was also Alex's official food taster, which may be why the Ptolemies seem to have a thing about poison. But Ptolemy had a problem. How was he going to get the Egyptian people to see him as their leader? Luck would have it that, as he was mulling the problem over, he was helping escort Alexander's body back to Macedonia for burial. Then Ptolemy had a light bulb moment.
You know what? I'm gonna steal that body.
He whisked Alex's corpse away back to Alexandria, put him in a gold sarcophagus in a public place, and was like,
See Alex, everybody? All draped in gold? What a total god, am I right? And you know, I'm basically kind of maybe related to him, so that means I'm a god too. And it totally makes sense that I become your new pharaoh. So don't try to overthrow me, okay?
And that is how a Macedonian Greek family came to rule Egypt for the next 300 years. I'm sure some Egyptians were unsure about this new regime and about moving the capital city from Thebes to this new city, but Egyptians really wanted to make Egypt great again, and for that they needed a ruling family. And unlike the people who'd ruled previously, at least the Ptolemies actually based themselves in Egypt, and they were eager to lean into Egyptian culture, at least in some ways. They cast off their Greek get-ups and adopted that Egyptian god-king lifestyle, seducing the people into thinking that maybe the Ptolemies were meant to rule after all. Going Egyptian also meant reintroducing the whole brother-sister, daddy-wife incestuous marriage cycle. When he first settled in Egypt, Ptolemy was all ready to follow Macedonian custom. Just like Olympias's husband, Philip II, and Alexander the Great before him, he took several wives. But then his daughter, Arsinoe, saw an opportunity. She convinced her brother, also named Ptolemy, to marry her against Greek custom, thus establishing herself as his co-ruler, his equal. We covered Arsinoe in a separate episode, which is definitely worth a listen. Suffice it to say, she set a precedent for Egyptian noble women to find a clear path to the power seat if they were game enough to grab it. Dynastic origins established, we'll fast forward through several decades of intense family rivalry to get back to 69 BCE. As we do, be aware that this family has a very short list of baby names. There's really only one for boys, Ptolemy, and for girls there are three, Berenice, Arsinoe, and Cleopatra, which is actually a Greek name, meaning glory of her fatherland. To keep things straight, they often picked up nicknames. That first Ptolemy, for example, was Ptolemy Soter, which also means savior. Historians have also given each of them numbers so we can tell who's who. The Ptolemy family makes the Lannisters from Game of Thrones fame look like a bunch of My Little Ponies. They're both incestuous and cutthroat, but they take both of these things to a whole new level. Don't like your brother husband? Poison him, naturally. Want dad out of the way? Knife to the ribs, no big deal. When it comes to role models, Cleopatra has some intense female family members to learn from. Take mother-daughter duo Cleopatra's 2 and 3. Cleo 3 wasn't a big fan of her mom, it seems, so she deposed her and promptly married her mother's husband and her own uncle, Ptolemy VIII. Never mind that his nickname is Physcon, or Potbelly. Just lie on back and think of Egypt. But Cleo II wasn't about to retire and move to Florida, you know? She raised an army and used it to drive Cleopatra III and brother husband right out of Egypt. Ptolemy VIII got her back by murdering their son, chopping him into several pieces and sending him wrapped like a present back to Alexandria for Cleopatra II's birthday. Wait, what? Eventually, they all settled into a very bizarre ruling threesome. I'll bet they all slept super soundly at night. This is all to highlight a simple, strange truth about Cleopatra. She is born and raised in what's essentially the family edition of the Hunger Games. She grows up surrounded by subterfuge, political backbiting, and the kind of life where you never drink out of a cup before an enslaved person tastes its contents for you. She knows that if she doesn't end up in power, whoever is will see her as a threat and seek to off her. Loyalty means both everything and nothing. Love can be a powerful bond and also a weakness. Trust is a luxury she can't often afford. What would this childhood look like? Would Cleo have run through the gilded halls of the palace with her sisters, laughing and playing make-believe? Before they were old enough to understand, they'd probably end up killing each other? Was there love here or just animosity? Each is surrounded by a team of hangers-on, tutors, advisors, generals, moneymen, all hoping to make their young charge the next king or queen of Egypt. They fight her battles until she's old enough to fight them for herself. It's easy to imagine this childhood doesn't engender much trust or compassion. It does, however, shape her to successfully rule a country in a very troubled time. But to make it to adulthood, she'll have to have a sharp mind, a clear grasp of politics, a decisive wit, the ability to adapt to changing circumstances, a strong sense of self-worth, and a real sense of entitlement. Luckily, Cleopatra's got all these things in spades. Cleopatra's father is a guy named Ptolemy XII. He became pharaoh in 80 BCE, when the direct family line looked up and was like, "Wait, did we just kill everybody in the direct line of succession? We did. Better find a second cousin." He was the son of a Ptolemy, but his mom was only one of his side pieces, so his claim to the throne was tenuous at best. His grandmother, the cutthroat Cleopatra III, sent him away from Alexandria years before to keep him out of danger, doing, well, we don't really know what. Maybe he was groomed for kingly greatness, or maybe he looked up in 80 BCE and was like,
Wait, what? Me? Be pharaoh? Oh, I mean, sweet, yeah. I guess I can make that work.
Since the elite of Alexandria are big on their kings being too legit to quit, he makes sure to solidify his claim quickly, renaming himself the New Dionysus to give himself some extra swagger. But most people call him by one of two nicknames, Nothus, or bastard, and Auletes, Greek for piper or flute player. This last is because he's fond of playing an oboe-like instrument that is apparently a favorite amongst prostitutes. Okay. But look, it works for Cleo's dad. He's fond of wine, parties, women, and wailing on that flute, as Strabo said.
Apart from his general licentiousness, he practiced the accompaniment of choruses with the flute, and upon this he prided himself so much that he would not hesitate to celebrate contests in the royal palace, and at these contests would come forward to vie with the opposing contestants.
Though in the midst of all these epic jam sessions, he does a pretty good job of producing future Ptolemies. It's interesting to note that though the family is into incestuous closed-loop marriages, it doesn't seem like they have the same incest-related issues as earlier pharaohs. That might be because, though Ptolemy XII marries his sister, or maybe cousin, Cleopatra V Tryphena, he definitely takes unrelated mistresses on the side. The Ptolemies don't have harems per se, just dalliances out of wedlock, which can make lines of succession a little bit confusing. Some people think Cleo herself might have been the product of such a union. Was it with an Egyptian lady? Maybe. Or someone Macedonian? We really don't know. We know next to nothing about her mom of record, Cleopatra V Tryphena, who falls off the face of ancient records the same year Cleo is born. Which brings up another question, still hotly contested. Was Cleopatra actually black? Given that her lineage is Macedonian Greek, we think probably not, but we really have no way of knowing. If we could go back in time and ask her, I imagine she would say that she's both Greek and Egyptian, so I think we should just leave it at that. Ptolemy the sexy flautist also has two sons, both of whom are named Ptolemy, and two other daughters, Berenice and Arsinoe. Cleopatra, we think, is the middle child. There's a lot we don't know for certain about Cleo's upbringing, but plenty we can infer. Each Ptolemy child will have a whole team of people very interested in keeping them alive and well. When no one's trying to kill her, it's a lush and indulgent existence in one of the ancient world's richest and most beautiful cities. Imagine her running down hallways filled with tiles of ebony and ivory, over lush Persian carpets and leopard skin rugs, through doors decorated with mother-of-pearl, garnet, topaz. She's playing in palace gardens where keen zoologist Ptolemy II is said to have once kept giraffes, bears, and pythons. She's taking trips during the festival season down the Nile, dressed up and participating in cult rituals to remind the people of the family's divine right to rule. Through it all, she's receiving the best education a Hellenic girl can buy, and Cleopatra is an excellent student, keen to soak up everything she can. Let's talk about her hometown, as it's a place whose streets we'll want to get lost in. Despite the many years of stabby family relations between that first Ptolemy and this latest one, the family has managed not only to hold onto and expand Egypt's borders, but to bring Alexander's dream city to life. It's a Greek city in essence, full of Greek language, art, and culture, but with distinctly Egyptian accents. If the ancient world had a most livable cities list, Alexandria would top it every time. Sailing into this walled city on a narrow strip of peninsula, you're greeted by the city's Great Pharos, or lighthouse. It's the world's first such structure, and it's the reason we call tall structures with flaming lights atop them lighthouses. It has some 5 levels and stands around 450 feet tall, guiding sailors into port with fires by night and smoke by day, we think, and using metal mirrors to send the light out over the water. It will survive for a staggering 17 centuries. They sure don't build them like they used to. Once you've landed, you'll find yourself strolling along a long, wide boulevard called the Canopic Way. It's the grandest street in the ancient world. 80 chariots can ride down it side by side. All the better for holding grand parades, which the Ptolemies are very fond of. It runs from east to west, lined with elegant columns and silk tapestries, capped by the Gate of the Moon on the east side and the Gate of the Sun at the west. The royal complex is quite prominent, located near the harbor. Beyond it, you'll find bustling market stalls, vibrant shops, street performers, and lots of ibis. These black and white birds are sacred to Egyptians, tied to Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing. But watch out, they'll steal your lunch if you let them. I once had one snatch a sandwich right out of my hand with its long, bendy beak. But I digress. Ships pour into this port from all over the world, bringing silk and spices, ebony, ivory, aromatic plants, precious metals, scrolls, perfumes, you name it. Egyptian grain flies out of it too, marching out to feed a huge proportion of the population in places like mighty Rome. The city is heavily influenced by Greece in terms of style and language, and thus feels very different than the rest of Egypt. You'll find public baths here, giant statues, a massive gymnasium, and temples dedicated to both Greek and Egyptian gods. It's as New York City is to New York State, a part of the greater whole, to be sure, but also its own world. Alexandria is a diverse city. It links India, Arabia, Africa, and the Western world. And being a port city, it's full of riches and wonders and people from all over. Its citizens love to have fun, to live out loud and in color. It is not easy for a stranger to endure the clamor of so great a multitude, said one tourist, or to face these tens of thousands unless he comes provided with a lute and a song. It's separated into ethnic quarters, all called by letters of the alphabet, making Alexandria perhaps one of the earliest cities to have street addresses as we recognize them today. Jews, Greeks, Egyptians, and others are running their own parts of town, but also mixing and melding around the many theaters, bordellos, and warehouses. Much like the much later city of Constantinople, riots and protests aren't uncommon. In fact, they're a bit of a fixture here. The Ptolemies have taken great pride in making Alexandria a place of art and learning.
The city has exceedingly beautiful public places and palaces covering a quarter or a third of its area.
Strabo tells us.
Since each of the kings, just as he contributed some enhancement to the public monuments, so too he added to the existing buildings a private residence, so that now, as the poet says, they are one on top of the other.
The city's famous library contains the greatest collection of knowledge in the ancient world. It's called the Mouseion, which is Greek for a seat or shrine of the muses, and is where we get the word museum from. Ptolemy Soter was known to hoard everything ever written on a quest to create the world's largest book collection. A man after my own heart, to be sure. He sent emissaries all over to acquire them, raiding book fairs in Rhodes and Athens. He also regularly plundered ships coming into harbor.
Oh, don't worry,
He'd say.
I'll have my scribes make a copy and give the original back. You know, probably.
Some say the Mouseion houses 500,000 scrolls, though it's probably more like 100,000, including some of Sappho's poetry. A massive number when you consider this is a time when everything has to be written by hand. There's a museum attached where a community of scholars are given tax-free room and board so they can focus on big thinking. The circumference of the world is first measured here, coming within a few hundred miles of accurate. The sun is pinned at the center of our solar system. Legend has it that Archimedes, the guy, not the owl from Disney's Sword in the Stone, invented his Archimedes screw here, which is a pump for transporting water from below ground to above. This is the intellectual center of the world. If you're in Rome and your tutor didn't train in Alexandria, then he's a hack job, and don't let anyone tell you different. Cleopatra has all this at her fingertips and lives in a society where it's cool for royal women to know things. Not just royals, but women in general. Alexandria is home to lady doctors, painters, poets. You don't even have to be noble to get an education. We talked in another episode in Season 2 about a woman named Agnadyce, who came from Greece to Alexandria so she could train to be a doctor, then practice secretly back home even though she wasn't strictly allowed. While Romans tend to think women are at their best when they're quiet, barefoot, and pregnant, Egyptians like an educated woman. You know, as long as she doesn't try to cause too much trouble. Cleopatra is probably studying math, geometry, and astronomy, and knowing her dad, there's probably some music lessons in the mix. She's reading the classics and memorizing poems. Imagine her sitting on the palace steps, reading Homer's The Iliad in the original Greek. Her tutors make sure to instruct her in rhetoric, how to persuade, convince, and manipulate someone into seeing your side of things. She seems to love her studies, and especially languages. Plutarch tells us she speaks Greek, of course, and Hebrew, plus the languages of the Medes, Parthians, Arabs, Syrians, troglodytes, a word that in Greek means cave dwellers, and an Ethiopian language that Plutarch says is
like the screeching of bats.
Sure, Plutarch. She's apparently the only one of her siblings who bothers learning native Egyptian, the same language her 7 million subjects all speak. She must know the power that comes from being able to communicate directly with the people, whether they be Macedonian or Egyptian. And it makes eavesdropping just that much easier. Plutarch, like pretty much all of our sources, never actually met Cleopatra. He won't be born until around 45 CE, but he still has lots to say about her, including how lovely she is to listen to.
It was a pleasure merely to hear the sound of her voice, with which, like an instrument of many strings, she could pass from the language to another, so that there were few of the barbarian nations that she answers by an interpreter. To most of them she spoke herself.
A quick word on Cleopatra's looks. We have many pieces of art that depict her, but the truth is we don't know what she looked like. So we'll just have to use our imaginations. Plutarch insists that Cleopatra isn't beautiful. Instead, he writes, her bearing is
not in itself so remarkable that none could be compared with her, or that no one could see her without being struck by it, but the contact of her presence, if you lived with her, was irresistible. The attraction of her person, joining with the charm of her conversation and the character that attended all that she said or did, was something bewitching.
In terms of her power, we don't know if she's being groomed at this point to be pharaoh. Given she's not the firstborn or a man, it's unlikely. But she's trained up for the position anyway. With the Ptolemies, you never know who's going to end up on top. At this point, Egypt isn't the easiest empire to be in charge of. It has been broken open, globalized, and exploited by outsiders. As the breadbasket of the Mediterranean, the superpowers all around it see it as a prize jewel worth winning. One of those powers is ancient Rome. If Rome and Egypt had a Facebook relationship status, it would definitely be it's complicated. Rome is the Mediterranean world's greatest military power, and they're insatiably hungry, gobbling up nations left and right. They'd just love to invade and run Egypt. But it's too big to control, and they're stretched pretty thin already. Plus, whichever individual general conquers it could turn around and use its resources to seize control of what is, right now, the Roman Republic. Better to make sure that whoever's ruling Egypt is firmly on the side of Team Rome. And Ptolemy XII isn't afraid to wave his Team Rome foam finger, since he inherited a land with crippling debts. There's also the fact that a previous Ptolemy left Egypt to Rome in his will, which means it's hard to shut them out completely. And in a family where someone's always trying to steal your throne, it pays to have powerful friends. So like many Ptolemies before him, Cleopatra's dad looks to Rome for legitimacy, giving them troops and money in exchange for their support. This is right around the time when our favorite Roman threesome, Pompey, Julius Caesar, and Crassus, are causing trouble over in Rome. Ptolemy supposedly pays Pompey and Caesar 6,000 talents. It's hard to translate what that would mean in our money, but we're talking a whole boatload, to be his friend. The Alexandrians don't like how chummy their pharaoh is being with outsiders, and the city's population isn't afraid to stage a riot, which they do. Cleopatra's dad is like,
Shit, man. I just want to throw parties and play my flute. Is that so wrong?
and then he goes way too far. The Romans take over the island of Cyprus, which Ptolemy's brother rules, and he doesn't stop them. His brother kills himself rather than give in to the invaders, and it royally pisses everyone off. So Alates is booted off his throne, and he and a teenaged Cleopatra end up fleeing to Rome. Well, at least we think. Cleopatra might stay in Alexandria during this time, but like so much about her life, it's unclear. Either way, the throne is empty, y'all. Let the games be ever in your favor. Big sister Berenice ends up nabbing the prize. It turns out the Egyptians dislike Ptolemy XII so much, they're willing to have a teenage girl at the helm instead of him. But she is a woman ruling alone, and we all know that won't do, so her loyal followers pressure her into marrying someone ASAP. One of her brothers would be best, of course, but they're still really young, so she lets the people choose her husband for her. The chosen suitor is a prince from the massive Seleucid Empire in what is now Syria, and whose name is, inevitably, Seleucid. But he must be either really boring or flosses in bed or something, because within a week she supposedly has him strangled. Boy, bye. Next up is Archelaus from Anatolia, who fares better, but he has about as much power as the pool boy who fans her face with a palm frond. Berenice is definitely the one running the show. Meanwhile, over in Rome, Ptolemy isn't holed up in an Airbnb eating his feelings. He's petitioning, bribing, anyone who will listen to help him take back his throne. If Cleopatra is with him, she's getting a serious lesson in how to market yourself and bribe with abandon. Dad plasters posters around the Forum and Senate.
Vote for me. I play the flute.
And gifts the people with fancy canopied couches, the ancient equivalent of a really cool Vespa. In fact, he's so up in Rome's business that in 56 BCE, our pal Cicero complains that his suit has
gained a highly invidious notoriety.
Pompey actually puts Alates and Cleo up and speaks on their behalf in the Senate, a favor that he hopes will be repaid someday in full. When 100 delegates from Egypt arrive to protest Alates' return to the kingship, he throws a hissy fit, poisoning their leader and either murdering or bribing the rest to leave town. Classy. And so it is that, with a whole lot of palm greasing, Ptolemy marches back to Alexandria in 55 BCE, backed by a Roman army, the first one to ever touch down on Egyptian soil. As you can imagine, the Egyptians aren't real thrilled about it. But neither are the Roman soldiers, who aren't keen to brave the scorching desert for a flute-playing foreign bastard. We're Rome, damn it! What are we even doing here? But one of the young, chiseled Roman officers is totally down. His name is Mark Antony. The ancient world didn't have online dating profiles, but if they did, Mark Antony's might read something like this.
Sup, girl? It's General Marky Mark back in the game. Looking to have a good time because I've been killing it since '83. My motto, work hard, play hard, love hard. I ride my chariots fast, fight my bottles fierce, and chug wine straight from the bottle. I love all things Greek, hitting the gym in short tunics, playing practical jokes, and going to parties. It's a wasted night if I'm home before the sun rises, and I ain't wasted. Oh, and the ladies. I love the ladies. Or should I say, the ladies love me. If you think you can handle me, hit me up.
This currently 25-year-old up-and-comer will spend time in Alexandria once they take it back for Ptolemy. This may be when he first meets and has lusty feelings for a 13-year-old Cleopatra. And maybe she likes him too, or maybe she just briefly ogles his legs under his Roman toga. Who knows, but let's keep him in mind. We'll be coming back for him later. When Ptolemy secured the city, he's like,
Bye, Bernice.
and promptly chops her head off. Nice, Dad. Lucky Cleo probably gets to watch. Being a daughter of the pharaoh, she must wonder how many steps she might be away from a similar fate. Some say Ptolemy makes her his co-regent at this point, and thankfully, he doesn't try to marry her as well. Dad clearly likes his daughter, and she likes him. She'll later add the word philopater, or father-loving, to her official king name. But 5 years later, Ptolemy XII lays dying. He writes his will, and in it he does something truly annoying. He declares that he wants Cleopatra and her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, to be co-rulers after he bites it, and he puts them both under Rome's guardianship. Maybe he doesn't think Cleo will be accepted without a man beside her. Maybe he's hedging his bets in case one of them dies. Or maybe he sees there's no surviving as an independent empire anymore, not without Roman support. Alates officially calls them Theoi, Neoi, Philadelphos, new gods, and loving siblings, probably hoping they'll also get married, which, eventually, they will. Yummy. When Dad dies of incredibly natural causes, Cleo takes the throne with one hand tied behind her back. She has to share the title with a brother whose team will, from minute one, be trying to get rid of her. Thanks a lot, Dad. But at age 18, Cleo is ready to rule, and she has all the tools she needs for greatness. We can imagine her thinking,
Move over, bitches. I'm about to show you what it means to be a queen.
First, she works to get in good with the local Egyptians. With the sacred Bacchus bull dead, an animal worshipped by a cult near Thebes in Upper Egypt, she sails with the new bull some 600 miles up the Nile to oversee his inauguration. She may have been the first Ptolemy to do so in person. These festivals are sacred moments when the Egyptian people get to see their gods and goddesses, to interact with the divine, and Cleo knows it. She makes sure to present herself at many such religious ceremonies where the people can see her doing the ancient equivalent of kissing babies, and looking like an absolute goddess as she does it. Ptolemaic women have made an art form out of aligning themselves with Isis, a fierce goddess and lady of the underworld. If you'll remember from our Egypt episodes from Season 2, she's the one who uses powerful magic to resurrect her murdered husband Osiris, whom she gifts with a golden penis so they can have one last epic roll in the hay. The product of that union is Horus, the god upon high who protects Egypt's royalty. She goes back a long way, to the Old Kingdom, but Isis really picks up popularity under the Ptolemies. Powerful, yet kind, Isis becomes popular even beyond Egypt, with cults popping up in Greece, Rome, and beyond. Royal women, going back as far as Arsinoe too, take pains to associate themselves with Isis. Cleopatra goes so far as to claim to be her manifestation on Earth, and I think she believes it. If you'd been told from infancy that you were the child of a new god, you'd probably believe it too. Cleopatra takes every opportunity to be like,
excuse me, Ptolemy who?
Claiming herself as sole ruler on a bunch of monuments, conveniently forgetting to add her brother's name. Whoops. He doesn't feature on the flip side of her official coins either. Meanwhile, she's taking a page out of Hatshepsut's book and carving images of herself all over Egypt. As she might say,
I mean, who needs to kill their brother when they're crushing that ancient Instagram feed?
this is the Cleo we don't often see, an absolute boss, great at PR and at making sure her country runs smoothly. But the Nile isn't flooding like it used to. The people are starving. Grain stores aren't what they were. And she keeps stumbling over the issue of how to deal with Rome, whose generals are currently playing a bloody game of political musical chairs as they shift from a Senate-led democracy to one that crowns people emperors for life. How can she possibly keep Egypt independent in the midst of Rome's epic civil war? How to hold Rome at bay without pissing them off? From here on in, Cleopatra is going to spend a lot of time trying to keep the wolves at bay, or, more accurately, trying to tame them. Egypt may always be going to Papa Rome to help settle their dynastic matters, but Rome is always sailing to Sugar Mama Egypt for supplies and money. This is the time when Pompey and Julius Caesar are duking it out for who's going to be Rome's one true leader. It's only a matter of time before one or both of them come calling, asking for ships and money. Who to choose? When Pompey's son asks Cleo for troops, she gives them freely. After all, Pompey's the one who got her dad those Roman troops way back when. But the Egyptian locals tend to revolt when they're hangry, and this move does not make her many friends. There's also what she does when those Roman legions that once helped her dad out were recalled back to Rome. They refused to go, as by that point they'd settled in and started families in Alexandria, and got so upset about it all that they killed the governor's son who came to collect them. Cleo, thinking she's doing a good thing, sends them back to Rome in chains. Again, the Alexandrians are pretty unimpressed by giving in to Rome's whims in such a fashion. And don't forget, there's Ptolemy XIII and his posse for her to contend with, who are more than ready to get rid of Cleo at the first available opportunity. And then, in 48 BCE, their time finally comes. They press Pompey to officially claim Ptolemy XIII Egypt's sole ruler, and Pompey's like,
"No prob, because a woman in power? I'll take a hard pass on that."
And so Cleopatra finds herself an exiled queen, fleeing the only home she's ever known, with no certainty she'll ever make it back again, or even that she'll live to see another day. She heads to Thebes, then to Syria, to try and figure out how to get her throne back. This is where young Cleo really comes into her own. In 48 BCE, after fleeing through Middle Egypt, Palestine, then Syria, this rejected royal gets busy. She spends a hot, dusty summer raising an army. I imagine her command of languages comes in handy here, as she uses her epic powers of persuasion to recruit some, hopefully loyal followers. When we picture Cleopatra, we often think of her lounging in luxury, but this is not her current situation. She knows how to rough it when she needs to and is willing to go to great lengths and suffer great discomfort. Cleopatra is an adventuress as well as a queen. Knives out, she marches through the Sinai to camp in the eastern delta. For a clearer picture of where this is exactly, check out my map of ancient Egypt, which you'll find in the store over on my website. Unfortunately, Ptolemy XIII and his team are ready for her with a 20,000-man force full of pirates and outlaws. They're stationed at a fortress in Pelusium, making it nigh on impossible for her to break through. She's relegated to the red sands down the coast, where she paces and schemes. She's outnumbered, which means she'd probably lose in a battle. How to get around them and back into her city. How to reclaim her throne and neuter her brother for good. This is about the time that fate intervenes in the form of Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar's dating profile would definitely all be in the third person, and it might go a little something like this.
Some people say Julius Caesar has an ego, but he thinks he just has what you'd call a big personality. And he is pretty big in so many manly ways. Ambition, intelligence, cunning, man tackle. His friends like to joke that he's craftier than a Bond villain, but obviously so much more virtuous and handsome. He enjoys nothing so much as war games, reciting poetry, snappy dressing, slaying the ladies, and pointed adoration of his soldiers. And wait, did he already say slaying the ladies? He's never seen a title, a foreign land, or a fine woman he didn't want to come, see, and conquer. He's a totally chill guy, as long as your team's Caesar. Just don't joke about his bald spot. Seriously, just don't.
A reminder of where we're at in Rome's history. This is the time when the first triumvirate is duking it out for who will control their home country. Right about now, the tide is starting to turn against Pompey the Great. In this year, he gets roundly trounced by Julius Caesar at a place called Pharsalus. He limps off the battlefield to seek a place of refuge and immediately thinks of Egypt. I mean, he is the reason those Ptolemies are even on the throne, right? Their dad loved him, and their kids owe him, so they'll definitely roll out the welcome mat. What he doesn't know is that Ptolemy XIII and his band of advisors are keenly aware that they need to stay in Rome's good books, and they worry that in Pompey they've backed a losing horse. Should they try and make nice with him, as Ptolemy XII did, or should they side with Julius? Ptolemy isn't so sure, but his three main advisors, Theodotus, Achelous, and the eunuch Pothinus, are like,
Ugh, we're overcomplicating this. Let's just chop his head off and be done with it.
He's too much of a danger, and after all, as Pothinus apparently says,
dead men don't bite.
Pompey lands just off Pelusium, where he's picked up in a small boat and taken to shore. He hasn't even stepped onto the sand yet when some soldiers kill him while his entire force watches from their ships. When Caesar arrives 3 days later, ahead of most of his troops in search of Pompey, he's gratified by his warm reception. But then, when Ptolemy XIII hands him Pompey's severed head, surprise, you're welcome, it's said that Caesar bursts into tears. Yeah, so maybe it's convenient that his enemy is gone, but this guy wasn't always his enemy. He was once his ally and even his son-in-law. So instead of pumping his fist and saying, "Sweet job, Egypt," he is pissed. Ptolemy's plan has blown up in his face. When Caesar looks around, he's annoyed by the mess he sees in Egypt. He can't afford for the Mediterranean's breadbasket to explode in civil strife, especially when they still owe a good amount of money.
What is this mess you've made, Ptolemy?
I imagine him saying.
And where is your sister? Ugh, you know what? Get her back here. We're all going to sit down and have a nice little chat.
Ptolemy XIII has no interest in being commanded by Caesar or in seeing his sister back. Luckily, Cleopatra has plenty of spies in high places, and she gets word of the goings-on. Julius is now Rome's most powerful man. He's mad at her brother, and he has troops, or soon will. She has one chance to win his favor and woo him to her side, and she isn't about to squander it. But if she isn't careful, this door might just slam on her fingers. When and how to get to Caesar is going to be one of the most fateful decisions of her life. She could send a messenger to plead her case, but they could be intercepted or bribed. Sometimes, if you want something done right, you've just got to do it yourself. She has a loyal servant, Apollodorus, sneak her back into Alexandria in a tiny boat. This isn't an afternoon pleasure cruise. She has to navigate around some treacherous swamplands, then go the long way down south and up the Nile, past patrols and who knows what dangers. It's a trip of some 8 days, and those days are very tense. Eventually, Apollodorus rows her into Alexandria. But how to get into the palace without being seen? She decides to pull her own version of the Trojan horse. Apollodorus rolls her up in a giant carpet, throws her over his burly shoulder, and carries her into the palace. Well, that's how the legend goes. Plutarch tells us that.
As it was impossible to escape notice otherwise, she stretched herself at full length inside a bedsack, while Apollodorus tied the bedsack up with a cord and carried it indoors to Caesar.
Some historians think it's the type of sack one might have transported papyrus scrolls in, which is a nice image. Papyrus scrolls are full of wit and knowledge, and you know what? Cleo is too. Regardless of its exact dimensions, Apollodorus covers her with something and walks her right in with no one the wiser.
Scrolls coming through, nothing to see here.
But he has to smuggle her into Julius's suite, which he's locked himself into, given that the Alexandrians are now rioting outside the royal complex. Turns out they're kind of mad to see another Roman lording it over the Egyptian royal family. We don't know if she's actually unrolled in front of Caesar. If your entire future depended on the impression you made on one particular Roman gentleman, wouldn't you want a minute to freshen up and check your breath? Despite what most pieces of art will tell you, she probably isn't dripping in jewels or dressed in nothing but lacy underthings either. I mean, come on, Renaissance painters, eyes up. But it's fair to say she must plan this moment carefully, from what she's wearing to every word she's going to say. This secret meeting is a giant risk. We have no idea what she and Julius say to each other, so let's do a little creative scene setting, shall we?
Hey, Julius.
Oh, damn. How'd you get in here?
Listen, about this whole who should rule Egypt business, I think we both know I'm the person for the job.
Go on. I'm listening.
You want some of Egypt's riches. I want the throne I was destined to wear. Let's be friends, and we can both get what we want.
Political friends, for sure. But also, sexy friends?
Maybe.
Does she charm him into bed with her sexy magic, poisoning his mind as Roman writers would have us believe? Maybe. But arguing that she humped her way into Caesar's good books does them both a huge disservice. Caesar is a master seducer. There is no way some horizontal tennis time with a pretty young queen is going to force him to do anything he doesn't want to. And Cleo's got a lot more going for her than the sweet delights of her body. There's every reason to believe she convinces him that allying with her is a good idea without resorting to such tactics. Though, knowing how much Julius likes a strong, opinionated woman, we can imagine that he's extremely impressed.
It was by this device of Cleopatra's that Caesar was first captivated.
Plutarch tells us of the unfurling carpet trick.
For she showed herself to be a bold coquette, and succumbing to the charm of further intercourse with her, he reconciled her to her brother.
No matter how it goes down, this we know for certain. This exiled queen, with everything to lose, convinces Rome's most powerful general that she's the one he should throw his weight behind. I think if Cleopatra could sum it up, she might say,
I came, I saw, I conquered.
Yeah, you did. To say that brother Ptolemy XIII doesn't take this well is putting it mildly. It's said he runs into the street and throws a huge fit before promptly finding himself under house arrest. From there, not all is smooth sailing. Far from it. Not only are the Alexandrians angry about Caesar storming their city, but they're mad at Cleo for getting into political bed with him. Over the next several months, they'll be trapped in the palace and fighting for their lives under a full-scale rebellion. And the Alexandrians are not to be underestimated. Cleo's great-uncle, Ptolemy XI, was once torn limb from limb in the streets because the people were mad that he murdered his wife. I mean, fair. Her royal name is not enough to protect her, and Caesar might not be either. They face threats both without and within. Though Ptolemy XIII is under house arrest, his supporters are out there raising armies. Not wanting to be left out, Cleo's younger sister, Arsinoe, sneaks out of the palace complex and helps lead a rebellion. Though, of course, the guy in charge of that rebellion, Achilles, gets mad because she has too many opinions. No matter, Arsinoe kills him and takes over. The Ptolemy women do not suffer fools. Unfortunately for her, her troops ultimately betray her, turning her in exchange for Ptolemy XIII, and she ends up prisoner once again. Whew, the drama. During all this madness, Julius and Cleo are trapped in the palace complex with nothing but his skeleton crew of 4,000 men, small beans compared to the rebel forces. He can't get word out to try and rally reinforcements, so he and Cleo try to broker some peace. Fights are taking place in the streets on the regular. Before long, they're cutting off supply lines, determined to starve them out. Julius's men freak out because someone fills the palace reservoirs with salt water, and Caesar's like,
We're Romans. Pull up your big boy pants and dig some holes.
The rebels even start erecting assault towers. How long will it be before they breach Julius's defensive walls? At one point, with battle raging around the Pharos, he is tossed from his boat and almost drowns. In desperation, he has his troops set fire to his ships in the harbor. Better that than have the enemy take them. This may or may not be responsible for burning down the city's world-famous library. I can't imagine Cleo is pleased. But it isn't all bad news. If the Alexandrians are hoping to get Julius out of Egypt, all they really succeed in doing is pushing him into Cleo's arms. Turns out that she and this 52-year-old leader find plenty to do to pass the time in lockdown. Know what I'm saying? Eventually, some allies swoop in from Judea to help Caesar, and the climax of the so-called Alexandrian War takes place at the Battle of the Nile. Ptolemy XIII drowns during the battle, conveniently for Cleo, and Caesar finally puts her where she belongs, on the throne. But not alone. You didn't think they'd let a lady rule solo, did you? She's crowned alongside her even younger, still living brother, Ptolemy XIV, whom of course Cleo marries.
A mere pretense,
Cassius Dio tells us.
which she accepted, whereas in truth she ruled alone and spent all her time in Caesar's company.
But even when things calm down, finally, Caesar doesn't sail home. Not even when Rome calls him up, all like,
Hello, Julius? What you doing?
Sorry, what was that? I can't hear you. You're breaking up.
Instead, he lingers, eating figs and basking in Cleopatra's glory. It's said they go on a pleasure cruise down the Nile, taking in the Great Pyramids with many ships in tow. Why does he stay when there's no clear political benefit in doing so, and in fact maybe some political harm? Roman poet Lucan says that
Cleopatra's been able to capture the old man with magic.
I say she's captured him with her wit and many charms. Does he love her? He's most certainly fascinated and definitely infatuated. But does she love him? It's hard to say. But look, they make a great team, and they want to show Egypt, perhaps the entire Mediterranean, that this power couple is not going to be trifled with. But all good things must come to an end. In 47 BCE, Caesar sails into the sunset, leaving Cleo with 12,000 legionnaires to protect her. He also leaves her with a very royal bun in the oven, whom she'll give birth to not long after he goes. With her half-Roman son, Ptolemy XV Caesar, otherwise known as Caesarion, Cleopatra becomes perhaps the first Egyptian female pharaoh to use her baby-making ability to her own advantage. And she does it without giving up even 1 inch of her power. Over in Rome, Julius has a big parade to celebrate all the places he's conquered. During it, he marches Cleopatra's sister, Arsinoe, through the streets in golden chains. He then stuffs her in a temple and hopes she won't cause any trouble. A Ptolemy princess fading quietly into obscurity? Good luck with that, Julius. He also starts making some reforms directly inspired by his time in Egypt, concerning a census and plans for a public library. He also reforms the unwieldy Roman calendar so it more directly mirrors Egypt's 365-day one. Meanwhile, Cleo is left to rule Egypt in relative peace, with young Ptolemy XIV not much more than a royal seat warmer. But her regained position isn't without its challenges. After the Alexandrian War, there are a lot of hurt feelings and rivalries at court, which means she has to do some house cleaning. And by that, I mean some head chopping. She also builds her image as a divine ruler through theater and epic pageantry, dressing herself up as Isis at every chance. She gives money and favors to important priests, winning their devotion in a country where they are absolutely key. Like her ancestor, Arsinoe II, she participates in festivals and holy rituals, always rocking her Isis outfit, and the people are here for it. But she doesn't just rule from on high. She hears their grievances and helps settle disputes, smoothing out snarls between her subjects and her sometimes corrupt government officials. She also takes the country's debt in hand, devaluing the currency and introducing coins with different denominations for the very first time. Their markings determine their value, not their weight, and greatly help to regulate the economy. She and her massive governmental system control goods and services, making sure that money keeps flowing. Take the brewing industry. Cleo ensures brewers operate only with a license and receive their barley from the state. And so, Egypt's most lucrative industries, from wheat and barley to papyrus, linen, and oils, are essentially royal monopolies. Cleopatra is only growing richer, raking in fully half of what the country produces. She commands the army and navy, negotiates with foreign powers, decides the price of goods, and oversees the country's agricultural plans. We don't often hear a lot about this Cleopatra. Capable, savvy, thoughtful, and benevolent. A papyrus scroll dated to 35 BCE calls her Philopatris, or
she who loves her country.
And she does it all while pregnant and then delivering a child. We don't know exactly why she decides to leave Egypt to fly into Julius's arms. Maybe she really misses him. More likely, she wants to remind him that she exists, thanks, and introduce him to his child, his only son. She's probably hoping he'll name Caesarion his heir, making him the future ruler of both Rome and Egypt. Regardless, this queen is going to make a splash. We can only imagine her first impression of Rome, but it's probably something along the lines of,
Ew, why does this place smell like pee?
As we explored in Season 2, when we talked about life in Rome for the ladies, the Romans are great at building things like roads and aqueducts. But at this point in their history, they're not so renowned for their art or interior decorating. Rome is still pretty ugly at this point, rough and tumble and constantly under construction. Right now, there is no Colosseum, no Pantheon. Compared to rich, colorful, sophisticated Alexandria, it won't exactly make Cleo feel at home. And the women. Rome likes its ladies quiet and subservient, at least in public. So this foreign queen, with her lavish gifts and entourage and the illegitimate son of their leader in tow, is bound to set tongues to wagging. Cleo sweeps in like an ancient Kardashian. The public is fascinated. They don't want to look, but they just can't help it. She even inspires a new Roman hairstyle that involves many braids. Julius seems happy enough to have her. He moves her into his country estate on the west bank of the Tiber. No foreign royals are allowed in the city, so it's outside its limits, but still a perfectly respectable address. Thankfully, it's not the same house his wife Calpurnia lives in. Wait, did I not mention he was married? Awkward. Her biting wit and commanding presence ruffle more than a few feathers. In a world where women don't get to choose their husbands and they're supposed to keep eyes downcast, Cleopatra is very much out of her element, and there are men who most certainly resent her presence. As big deal complainer Cicero will say, though never to her face, of course.
I detest the queen.
To which I'm sure Cleo would reply,
Boy, please, I don't like you either.
It doesn't help that Caesar's away a lot, leaving her to fend for herself. Then, in 44 BCE, he's made dictator for life. We talked about this in our episodes on Servilia and Fulvia, but to remind you, Rome is still a republic at this point, and a lot of people are worried that Julius is getting way too big for his britches, acting all kingly in a land that is emphatically against. He already has a reputation for enjoying luxury a little more than a Roman leader should. Maybe spending all that time with a queen and living goddess gave him some poisonous notions? Cleopatra makes the Senate nervous. They can only imagine what she might be whispering to Julius over wine at their late-night dinners. Things like,
I mean, really, babe, you're not fooling anyone. You want to be a king, so just become one.
So, this is definitely the wrong moment for Julius to commission a huge golden statue of Cleo and install it in a temple right beside one of the goddess Venus. And yet, that's exactly what he does. This is par for the course for Cleopatra, who grew up surrounded by statues of family. It is, after all, the Egyptian way. But the Romans are like,
Are you serious right now?
It's one thing to worship a foreign queen in private. It's quite another to publicly place her next to a Roman goddess while acting like a god yourself. Fearing where Caesar's power is steering the Republic, some conspirators get together and decide to stab him. They murder him on the Ides of March. Et tu, Brute? Cue much anger, finger-pointing, and general chaos in Rome. But what of Cleopatra, who's still in the city? How must she feel when she hears of Julius's demise? She's lost her lover and Caesarion, his father. And she's a foreign queen in a city that's as flammable as a barrel of gasoline. I imagine her standing up quickly and saying,
"Okay, minions, it's time for us to bounce."
As 26-year-old Cleopatra boards her ships for home, she must be plagued by troubled thoughts. Whatever plans she had for Caesar are torn to pieces. If she wanted lasting security, that is nothing but tattered rags at her feet. To add insult to injury, when Julius's will is read aloud, she and her son will feature nowhere in it. Some sources say when she sails away from Rome, she is pregnant and has a miscarriage on the journey. That alone would be heartbreak enough. But she's also aware that Rome is a problem for Egypt. How long before its generals start fighting for power, dragging her and her country into their squabbles? What if those powers see her son as a threat? But Cleo isn't one to sit back and let the gods take the wheel. She's managed to harness Rome's powers in her favor and ensure her family's legacy before. She will do it again. She just has to figure out how best to play this game. When Cleo arrives back in Alexandria, she must be relieved to be home. But unfortunately, she has some fires to put out. Over at the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus, Cleo's sister Arsinoe has been stirring up trouble, gathering money and followers who insist she's the true queen. Also around this time, a pretender makes himself known, proclaiming he's Ptolemy XIII returned.
Sup, girl? You didn't really think I drowned in the Nile, did you?
To make matters worse, her 15-year-old brother-husband, Ptolemy XIV, is also becoming something of a nuisance. She's facing multiple familial threats here, and she's running out of figs to give. She has her brother killed, probably by way of poison. Whew, Cleo, that is cold. Unsavory as it is, it's nothing her forebears wouldn't have done. With him crossed off the future king list, she can do something she's probably longed to do for years: install her son as the new pharaoh. This achieves a couple of aims. First, it allows her to rule for him as co-regent without anyone hassling her about having lady parts. We're fine with women leaders in Egypt, just so long as we have a man attached. This particular man is only 3, so he poses no threat to his mother's way of doing things. And she can feel that much more secure on her throne. After all, he's the heir of Egypt and a golden son of Rome. It's right there in his official king name.
King Ptolemy, who is as well Caesar, father-loving, mother-loving god.
Subtle, Cleo. In propping up her son, she more firmly aligns herself with Isis in the Egyptian imagination, that powerful, much-beloved goddess who is also a mother who is willing to do anything for her family. And in wrapping her son up in Caesar's legacy, she's reminding those who might challenge her, Rome included, that she's got something they don't. She builds temples all across Egypt, carving herself and young Caesarion into stone at places like the Temple of Dendera. There they pose in crowns, offering incense to Isis, her son Horus, and her husband Osiris. That's some powerful iconography right there. By this time, she may also have started building the Caesarium, a massive structure dedicated to her baby daddy, right there in the harbor. She builds a giant temple to Isis as well. She also spends time nurturing an intellectual renaissance. Like the Ptolemies of old, she starts rebuilding her hometown as a place that learned people will want to hang out in. She starts a school of philosophy and fans the flames of a resurgence of scholarly works in areas like grammar and history. Medicine, too, sees a bump. Under her reign, doctors produce new works on treating many maladies and new surgical techniques. She's credited with furthering studies in science, magic, and medicine. The Talmud says she had a
Great scientific curiosity.
Years later, she'll be given credit for contributing new works on things like hairdressing and cosmetics. And though both claims come long after her death and are a little bit dubious, it's said she invents a great trick for keeping the skin young: bathing in ass's milk, and a handy cure for baldness. Its key ingredients are burnt mice, burnt horse's teeth, and bear grease. User discretion is advised. She'll later get a reputation in the Talmud for supposedly trying out experiments on female prisoners to try and figure out when a fetus becomes an embryo, which sounds unsavory, and we can hope it isn't true. Especially since she becomes a patron of the Temple of Hathor, dedicated to women's health. So, stay in power? Check. Produce an heir? Check. But things aren't all intellectual salons and fine perfume up in here. In 43 BCE, the Nile doesn't flood, and Cleo once again has to deal with big-time plague and famine. She has to grant tax exemptions, devalue her currency, and give out free grain. Still, when left alone to do her kingly business, Cleopatra proves herself well capable of running the show. And yet, like a truly terrible ex-boyfriend, Rome just won't stop calling. They're currently at war, again, and Cleo's soon going to be forced to pick sides. Again. Here's what's up with Team Rome right now, the studly Mark Antony. He's back.
Yo, let's get it.
Is now one of Rome's top dogs. But so is Julius's 18-year-old adopted son, Octavian. These two have temporarily joined forces to chase down Julius Caesar's killers. This results in many battles, and everyone wants Egypt's money and ships to give them an edge. Cleo can't ignore them. Not when one of Julius's murderers, a guy named Cassius, tries to bully her into giving him some ships. She sends him her apologies, no can do, then sends her ships to a guy named Dolabella. But one of her commanders goes rogue behind her back to help out Cassius, who is definitely an enemy of Mark Antony and Octavian's. Later, she tries to meet those two at the head of her own fleet to make amends, but it's turned back by foul weather and then illness. In the end, she just manages to make several men mad and makes friends with none of them. Eventually, Mark Antony and Octavian defeat the conspirators at the Battle of Philippi, and they become Rome's #1 heroes. And then, after some very tense months of hating each other, they decide to join forces with a guy named Lepidus and form something called the Second Triumvirate. Because look, Rome's territory is now so big that one man can't manage it alone, so these three men split it up into chunks between them. Octavian will manage Italy and the West, Lepidus gets some of Africa, and Mark Antony, now truly at the top of his game, is given the whole of the East. This conquering hero decides to leave his wife Fulvia behind and go on a grand tour of his new territories. It's basically the ancient equivalent of a lavish long-term party bus. Mark Antony is intense, excitable, and loves a good party.
Excuse me, I seen you over here lying. You gotta chug that right now.
So he's thrilled to stumble into these eastern ports to great fanfare and applause. All the client kings and eastern royals are invested in keeping him happy, so he's showered with attention, swimming in flowers, and virgins aplenty. Some, it said, even offer up their own wives for his pleasure.
No. We need a 3-to-1 ratio. 3 women, 1... Actually, 3 women, 0 men would be best.
Eventually, he settles in at Tarsus, a city in modern-day Turkey, and his mind gets to wandering to that luscious Egyptian queen. He sends a guy named Delius to call her to account for not supporting him and Octavian, and maybe woo her a little bit. He says,
Listen, I know you've been burned before, but Mark's a great guy. You'll love him.
Cleo is less than impressed, but she still charms the pants off of Delius, who quickly realizes 2 things. First, that he's dealing with a woman who isn't going to bend the knee to anyone. And second, his boss Mark is going to love her. Mark starts sending her the ancient equivalent of texts through his emissaries.
Yo, what up, girl? You awake? I mean, people say I look like Hercules. I mean, that's what I heard. More, I think Hercules looks like me, but, just saying. Yo, Cleo, Mark again. Seeing if you got my text. Def not, because otherwise you'd already be here. Yo, Cleo, Mark again. I see that you read the text. I got that there. You leave me hanging?
But Cleo leaves him on red. If she were to reply, it would be something like,
Yeah, hey, that's cool and all, but I'm super busy running a country. I just don't know when I'll have the time.
She will go and see him, of course. She can't afford not to. But she knows the powerful allure of delayed gratification. She isn't some 21-year-old exile anymore, sneaking back into her country by night. Not this time. There will be no burlap sack situation. Nope, this 28-year-old lady boss is going to show up with more swagger than Beyoncé and more costume changes than Lady Gaga. She knows this guy, at least by reputation. He loves drinking, good times, and a heaping helping of drama. And, of course, a fancy lady. He's already slept with a few king's wives on his epic Eastern party bus adventure. To win and then hold his attention, she's gonna need to do better. So she sails toward him on what has to be the ancient world's most opulent party barge, making one of the grandest entrances that history has ever seen. Shakespeare will describe this centuries later, but he didn't have to stretch his creative faculties far. Plutarch does that for him. He describes a boat with a gilded stern, silver oars, and purple sails. Music plays while colored smoke trails behind them.
She herself reclined beneath a gold-spangled canopy, dressed as Venus in a painting, while beautiful young boys like painted cupids stood at her side and fanned her. Her fairest maids were likewise dressed as sea nymphs and graces, some steering at the rudder, some working at the ropes. Wondrous odors from countless incense offerings diffused themselves among the riverbanks.
Can't you almost hear Mark Antony's jaw dropping? Cleo sends a message ahead saying that Venus has arrived, ready to party with Bacchus for the greater good of Asia. Very charmed, he responds by inviting her over for dinner. But she writes back saying she'd really rather have him over to her place. And he goes because, damn, this whole playing hard to get 'cause I'm a goddamn queen thing, it's really working for him. He's not single, as we know, but he's most certainly ready to mingle. Over a series of nights, Cleo proceeds to do what she does best and pull out all the extravagant stops. She decorates dozens of banquet rooms with luxe furnishings and decks out the trees with twinkling lights. Every table is heavy with gold cutlery. One night, she even fills the dining room knee-deep with rose petals. At the end of each meal, she invites her Roman guests to take things home with them. Furniture, horses, the enslaved, whatever. But even more impressive is the pharaoh herself. Ever the quick-witted chameleon, she reads Antony's personality and moods and caters to them. When he makes crude jokes, she makes some of her own. Instead of trying to show herself above him, she meets him on his level. By the time she sails home, their traveling romance has Mark a little bit obsessed. Once again, Cleo's got one of Rome's most powerful men on the hook, and she knows it. Are they really in love, or is this lust, or just politics? There's no doubt this alliance is important for them both. Mark Antony needs her money and ships. Cleopatra needs Rome's support to keep her throne. Ancient Roman writers would love to tell you that she uses dark, evil sex magic to addle this man's senses.
The moment he saw her,
Appian tells us,
Antony lost his head to her like a young man, although he was 40 years old.
Another claims he's under the influence of drugs when he falls for her. Plutarch says that Mark had faults before, but Cleopatra is really the one who ruins him.
Now, as a crowning evil, his love for Cleopatra supervened, roused and drove to frenzy many of the passions that were still hidden and quiescent in him, and dissipated and destroyed whatever good and saving qualities still offered resistance, and he was taken captive in this manner.
But I mean, come on. He might be a good-looking Marlon Brando-type bruiser with great curls and a hot temper who's probably slept with more women than you could fit inside an Egyptian pleasure barge. But he's still an accomplished general. Does Cleopatra have him in thrall? Absolutely. But not just because of the charms of her body. She is smart, as we know, and an incredibly interesting woman. I mean, what's not to like? And Mark Antony isn't afraid to advertise his feelings by offing Cleo's one remaining sibling. He orders someone to drag Arsinoe out of that temple in Ephesus and murder her right there on its steps. R.I.P., you almost queen. That Ptolemy pretender also gets offed, as well as that rogue naval commander on Cyprus, the one who supported Cassius behind Cleo's back. It's all a grand and pretty bloody romantic gesture, and Roman writers think it's all Cleo's fault. Of course.
Straight away, the attention that Antony had until now devoted to every matter was completely blunted,
says a very uptight Appian.
And whatever Cleopatra commanded was done, without consideration of what was right in the eyes of man or God.
Whatever, Appian. Don't blame Cleo for Mark's itchy trigger finger, okay? When winter comes that year, and Mark sends his army to various winter quarters, he just can't stop thinking about Cleopatra. So even though things at home in Rome are a bit touch and go, Antony decides to get on a ship and head for Egypt. He's gotta see his girl. Mark Antony falls quickly in love with Alexandria. But unlike his deceased mentor, Julius Caesar, he sails in without a grand Roman retinue, and the locals like him all the better for it. Before long, he is fully leaning into the Alexandrian lifestyle, shedding his Roman clothes for the comfort of Greek dress, speaking Greek instead of Latin. He uses the opportunity to cut loose like a college boy on spring break.
Oh, yeah, girl, let's go, let's go!
And Cleo is more than able to keep him entertained. It's said they sometimes sneak out of the palace disguised as a maid and slave, eavesdropping at people's windows and occasionally getting screamed at, which Mark thinks is hilarious. I can absolutely see him leaving a flaming bag of poo on someone's doorstep. The Alexandrians know it's Mark playing these pranks, and they indulge him. And though she's got to be busy, running a country, Cleo does it too. They hunt, they drink, they gamble, and above all, they feast. They even form a little club called the Inimitable Livers, and their parties are the stuff of legend. Plutarch tells us that Cleo and Mark make a bet about who can prepare the most expensive banquet. Cleo wins by drinking a giant pearl worth 10 million sesterces, which I've seen equated to 60,000 pounds of gold.
The servants placed in front of her only a single vessel containing vinegar.
Pliny tells us.
She took one earring off and dropped the pearl in the vinegar, and when it was wasted away, swallowed it.
Modern scientists have tested this out, and a pearl will dissolve in vinegar if you leave it for long enough. True or not, this story illustrates the kind of wild nights these two were having. The ever-judgy Appian says that in this way, Mark
was often disarmed by Cleopatra, subdued by her spells, and persuaded to drop from his hands great undertakings and necessary campaigns, only to roam about and play with her on the seashores.
You have to wonder if Cleo is finding all of this a little stressful. She wants to keep Mark engaged, and if possible, keep him close. But can she ever truly be herself with him? How is she supposed to juggle the responsibilities of being a ruler, a mother, and a pleasant playmate, and still occasionally get a few hours of sleep? Mark might be having a grand time in Alexandria, but his Roman responsibilities haven't just faded away. News comes that the Parthians have been causing trouble, as per usual, and then he gets an awkward call.
Sir? I know you said not to bother you while you're living it up, but your brother and your wife Fulvia just started a war with Octavian in your absence, and, they lost?
So Mark sails off to deal with his issues, and Cleo is left alone, having deftly cemented her connection to Rome, or at least to one of its most powerful generals. And even though Mark goes and yells at Fulvia, where she's taken refuge in Greece, and even though she dies of illness and Mark doesn't stick around, none of that is his fault, according to our sources. Dio tells us his neglect of her was because of
his passion for Cleopatra and her wantonness.
Okay. Once again, Antony finds himself at awkward odds with Octavian. Eventually, they strike an accord at the Treaty of Brundisium in October of 40 BCE. To cement their peace, Mark agrees to marry Octavian's sister. Her name is Octavia, because of course it is. We don't know how Cleopatra feels about this, but the alliance has to make her uneasy. There's also the fact that she's back in Alexandria giving birth to not one but two of Mark's babies, a set of twins. She names them Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, the sun and the moon. Now she's tied to Rome through 3 children. She's creating more potent binds between the East and West than anyone else could dream of. For the next few years, Mark and Cleo are kept apart. She can only watch her lover's actions from a distance. But she isn't worried. She knows Mark will come back. For a while, though, he stays away and even has some kids with Octavia. All girls, so lame. And just barely getting along with his brother-in-law. Eventually, in 37 BCE, Octavian and Mark have to meet once again to hash out their many issues. And Sister Octavia gives an impassioned speech about how she really, really wants them all to get along. Fences mended by a lady, Mark gets ready to sail away and finally defeat those pesky Parthians. His friends have every reason to hope he's over that whole Cleopatra business. But as he sends his wife and young kids back to Rome, he also sends a message to Alexandria asking Cleo to meet him in Antioch. 3.5 years after they last saw each other, this thing is about to be officially back on. It must be a pretty exciting reunion, because not long after they arrive, coins start circulating sporting both their faces, which is a pretty flagrant PDA. Mark officially one-ups Caesar by acknowledging their children together too. It doesn't hurt that one of them is a son, something Octavia hasn't been able to produce. Then he showers his leading lady with gifts in the form of land. He gives Cyprus back to Egypt for starters, something Caesar never did, plus pieces of Sicilia and Crete. He even deposes sovereigns to give these key places to Cleopatra. And now she rules nearly the whole of the Eastern Mediterranean. This is a new era for Egypt, and Cleo is the queen of it all. So she rebrands herself like the diva she is. There's lots of cause to celebrate. Before too long, she's given birth to another son, whom she calls Ptolemy Philadelphus. She's got the devotion of one of the most powerful men in Rome. It seems like no one can touch her. All she needs now is for Antony to do what he's long promised and defeat Parthia so she can truly be the Empress of the East. He heads off on campaign, and meanwhile, she takes a bit of a victory march through some of her territories. But Mark Antony is having a rough time of it in Parthia. He gets lost in the desert, betrayed by local guides he thought he could trust, and ends up limping away with troops dying of starvation and dysentery. He loses a third of his army, not in battle, but in running away from battle. Which, of course, all Roman writers are going to blame Cleopatra for.
So eager was he to spend the winter with her that he began the war before the proper time,
says Plutarch,
and managed everything confusedly. He was not the master of his own faculties, but as if he were under the influence of certain drugs or magic rites, was ever looking eagerly towards her.
Drugs, sorcery, and an evil uterus. The source of all the world's many problems, to be sure. When Cleo meets up with him, bringing reinforcements, she finds a wreck of the man she knew. Depressed, demoralized, defeated. We don't know how she reacts to seeing him in this state, but it can make her feel great. She and Egypt are just as invested in his success as he is. Meanwhile, Mark Antony's wife, Octavia, has sent word that she's coming to his aid as well, with 2,000 well-equipped guardsmen. Octavia is something of the Jackie Kennedy of Rome, much loved and admired for her beauty and infinite virtues. Cleopatra, of course, is not. Octavia makes it to Greece, but Mark holds her off via messenger. He doesn't want to lose Cleopatra's aid for the sake of what Octavia is offering. His wife sends an envoy to remind him of her many charms, urging him to accept. Cleopatra knows a rival when she sees one, so she tries a new approach, flagrant emotion. Apparently she cries, refusing to eat, dying of her love and passion. Her entourage says that she will give Mark everything if he will stay with her, and also that she'll die if he doesn't. Even Mark's friends are kind of into the intensity of her emotions, giving Mark grief for being such a heartless guy. Is she a woman desperate not to lose the man she loves here and the father of so many of her kids? It's entirely possible. She's definitely a woman who knows that if she loses Mark to his Roman wife, her throne might go with it. For this pharaoh, the stakes really could not be any higher. She's thrown all of her chips down for Mark Antony. She isn't about to let him go. Real or staged, her big show works on Mark.
He was not governed by the reasoning of a commander or of a man, or indeed by his own reasoning at all,
wrote Plutarch.
Rather, as some say in jest, that the soul of a lover lives in someone else's body, it was dragged around by a woman, as if he had become part of her and was carried with her.
He goes back to Alexandria for the winter and tells Octavia not to bother following. Back in Rome, Octavian is definitely unimpressed. In the spring, Mark Antony gets it together, finally, and invades Armenia, whose king betrayed him in his quest for Parthia. He just really needs a win, you know? He defeats them, marching the captured royal family back into Alexandria in chains. He then holds a triumph celebration, the first ever held outside of Rome. Mark sweeps down the Canopic Way on his chariot to much general fanfare. And then he presents his treasures and captives, taken presumably for Rome, to the Queen of Egypt. He, Cleo, dressed up in full Isis gear, naturally, and their children all occupy a set of golden thrones. Then Mark starts handing out titles and lands like it's Halloween candy.
Yo, kid 1 gets some land, kid 2 gets some land, kid 3 gets some land, my boo gets some land, everybody gets some land. I do what I want, bitches.
In what will later become known as the Donations of Alexandria, he gives Armenia and Medea to his son, Alexander Helios, Cyrenaica and Libya to Cleopatra Selene, Syria and Sicilia to his son Philadelphus. He also calls Cleopatra the Queen of Kings and pronounces Caesarion as both the King of Egypt and Julius Caesar's true heir, flipping the bird straight in Octavian's direction. If there is anything that's going to make Rome lose its mind, it is this. Cleo must know she and Mark are poking the bear here, but for all the glory this means for her family and for Egypt, it's a gamble she seems willing to take. Is she drunk on power, or is this calculated? In everything she does, she's trying to protect her country from being absorbed and overrun by the Roman machine. And since Mark Antony is Rome, at least right now, maybe she doesn't think she has anything to fear. Octavian's far away, and everyone knows he doesn't have the full support of the Roman people. Surely she's going to come out on top. And for a while, things are fine. Her wealth and prestige continue to grow, and she uses her money to build a massive navy. She's having fun feasts with Antony and hiring expert tutors to educate her kids. She is participating in religious rituals and festivals, like always, and even hearing lawsuits with Antony beside her. Mark's running Alexandria's gymnasium, getting buff and stuff, while she manages the affairs of her country. The crying, very thirsty woman from Antioch is a thing of the past. Meanwhile, though, the relationship between Mark Antony and Octavian is, struggling.
Yo, excuse me, Cleo, hold my beer.
At first, it's all about misappropriation of land. Mark Antony didn't get his share of Octavian's Italian distributions. Octavian wants his share of Armenia's spoils. As the clock ticks down the days until the contract they made to rule Rome together comes to an end, things start to get ugly. Octavian's telling everybody who will listen that Mark Antony's acting so badly that he's going to have to give up his claim to the east. Quiet barbs turn into a full-blown battle of insults hurled via quill and scroll.
Octavian's a coward who hides during battle.
Mark's a raging drunk who vomits during important meetings.
Well, Octavian gave Caesar sexual favors, and he likes deflowering virgins.
Well, Mark is past his prime, and also he's effeminate.
Oh, yeah? Octavian, I couldn't find you during that last battle. You hiding under a table?
And also, he spends his nights with a foreign sorceress instead of his actual Roman wife.
You Octavian, you fell off that horse, though.
Octavian leans hard on that last one, because if there's something that makes Romans deeply uncomfortable, it's a Roman leader acting like a king. Octavian wants Egypt, its riches and spoils, for his own purposes, and he wants Mark out of his way. That means he needs to find a reason to start a fight with him. So, he gets to work on a smear campaign meant to prove two things. One, that Mark Antony is no longer making his own decisions. One, that Mark Antony is no longer the man behind his own decisions. Two, that his foreign Eastern queen won't stop until she conquers Rome itself. Unfortunately, Mark and Cleo have given him plenty of material to work with. They head over to Ephesus to organize a military base and start recruiting other Eastern leaders to their cause. Ever the sugar mama, Cleo provides by far the most treasure: 200 warships fully manned, 20,000 talents, full supplies for all the soldiers to keep them fed and clothed. But the Senate isn't ready to give up on Mark yet. About a third of them are still with Mark Antony, and as the triumvirate deal expires, they sail over to Ephesus to let him know that allying with Cleopatra is seriously jeopardizing his cause on the home front. So Mark tries to send her away, we're told, but guess what? Cleo refuses to go. She argues that while she might not be a commander, her soldiers won't fight without their leader. They're loyal to the queen above all else. In the summer of 32, they sail over to Athens, where Mark gives Cleo quite a thoughtful gift: the library at Pergamum, one of the largest of the day. This adds fuel to Octavian's fire about Mark's dangerous affection for this foreign queen, as do their frequent PDAs. Supposedly, as Mark sits in discussion with kings, he frequently receives sultry love notes from Cleopatra, written on onyx and crystal. Well, that's extra. And stops what he's doing to read them. There are stories of him following along after her litter, like a little puppy, and of very publicly rubbing her feet. Octavian can't believe his luck with this insanity. And then Mark decides to officially divorce his wife Octavia and orders her to pack her bags and get out of his house. That's cold, Mark. And nobody in Rome is into it. The last straw comes when Octavian gets his hands on Mark's will, which he apparently wrestles out of the hands of our old friends the Vestal Virgins. When he starts to read it aloud to the Senate, everyone's real uncomfortable. This is not how things are done, you know? But they forget all about ethics when Octavian starts dropping bombs, either real or invented. First, we find out that Mark will be gifting all his lands and wealth to his children with Cleopatra, not with Octavia. Also, that he wants to be buried not in Rome, but in Alexandria. Sent away to Cleopatra in Egypt. See, says Octavian, he's not even really a Roman anymore. It's all he needs that October to proclaim war with Antony and Cleopatra. Except he doesn't declare war on Mark. No, just on Cleopatra. On Egypt. He knows the people of Rome won't be down to start another civil war. But a war against a foreign queen who wants to conquer them all? Yo, I'll go get my sword. Usually, there are several steps between declarations of violence against a client state and actual fighting. Senate approval, a chance for the other side to state their case. But there is none of that here. There aren't even really any official charges against Cleo. Just some swiftly mumbled,
"She's being mean and bad, and she's a lady, so bye,"
are all that seem to be required. Cleo's got to be, not surprised by this, but disappointed. She hasn't done anything hostile to Rome. In fact, she's tried real hard to do the opposite. This isn't just a battle between two Roman leaders. It's one for every Eastern monarch who's sick and tired of bowing down to Rome's bloodthirsty desires. And so it isn't long before they are able to recruit several Eastern kings to throw in with them. Mark Antony is going to lead the troops, obviously, but not on his own. He appoints Cleopatra his co-general. Put on your armor. It's time to go to war. Octavian's most savvy general, the strapping Agrippa, sails his troops along the coast of Greece to surprise them. Eventually, after some toing and froing, he corners Antony and Cleo in the port town of Actium. They have enough troops and a good enough position in the harbor that Octavian's troops can't sail in without losing a lot of their men. But Mark and Cleo can't sail out, and they can't escape overland, as they'd have to leave everything behind. Agrippa's cut off their supply lines. They are trapped. And so they languish for months on end, as Agrippa waits with weapons fully loaded. Before long, things in Mark and Cleo's camp are starting to fester. With their ranks filled with Thracians, Medians, and Macedonians, Cleopatra is a real asset. She can speak to them in their native languages. And though they're used to women in power, they're not all that comfortable with one holding court in the world of war. The Romans who've joined Mark's side are horrified to have a lady giving them orders. They start telling Mark that he should send her away, or he could just kill her. He refuses like a good boy. Disease spreads through camp, and bitterness along with it. Mark's allies and client kings start to defect. What should Cleo do? Take the hint and step out of the spotlight, or stick it out and take a very public stand? Not one to be dictated to, she chooses the latter. Octavian declared war on her, after all. She's fighting for her country, her family, and possibly her life. She can't afford to be seen as a wilting flower here. But she also can't afford for these men to see her as bossy or domineering. She's stuck squarely in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation that many modern-day boss ladies will know all too well. Starving, mosquito-infested, and suffering from low morale, her camp knows it's time to make a decision. Retreat by land or force a sea battle. Soon enough, they're making a break for it. Under cover of darkness, Cleo and her people load her ship with all of their treasure. In the morning, Mark and Cleo's 240 ships face off against Octavian's 400. Squadrons of 60 ships each head out in front, with Mark Antony captaining one of them, while Cleo's squadron follows behind. Can we just stop and enjoy the fact that Cleopatra is commanding 60 ships like an actual goddess? Can we picture her with a sword and dripping in gold? Okay, great. Now that we've got that visual. At midday, it begins. Ships crash and a fury of arrows fly, in one of the most epic naval battles in history. But then the center line starts breaking. Suddenly, Cleo's squadron crashes through the break and sails swiftly away into the sunset. Mark Antony abandons his warship for a smaller galley and follows after, leaving the battle behind. Opinions are divided on what's happening here. Was this their plan all along? A worst-case scenario gambit to save their treasury? Or does Cleopatra lose heart when she sees they're losing and decide to make a run? I can imagine her standing on the deck of her ship, watching the navy she paid for burning, and wanting more than anything else to go home. But I also struggle to imagine this fierce, powerful woman tucking tail and running with two armies watching. No matter the reason, the result of this move is disastrous. Their remaining fleets are surrounded. Those who don't die defect. The battle is lost, but what about the war? As they fight to get away, Mark Antony is clearly disturbed and deflated. He's done the unthinkable by Roman standards. He left his men behind to die. It's a betrayal from which he isn't going to recover. A broken man, he broods around in Alexandria, being all mopey. Cleopatra tries to get him to pull up his bootstraps and stop pouting, and then sends him off to North Africa to recruit some allies, but he mostly just drinks morosely with his buddies. All while she wastes no time trying to recruit some new friends to her badly depleted forces. She executes anyone who speaks out against her, confiscating their money to fill her war chest and pilfer some from temples as well. Cleo has a mind that never stops working. She's always coming up with plans on plans on plans. But she has trouble recruiting Eastern allies, so this queen of pivot comes up with another idea. Maybe she can transport her fleet and main fan base over land, then across the Red Sea to India, setting up operations there for a while? Her ships could be carried in pieces over the sand. I mean, Hatshepsut did it back in the day. They make it pretty far, all the way to the far side of the isthmus, before they meet with the Nabateans. Not a fan of Cleopatra, these people destroy her fleet as soon as they reach the shore. After a very sad Mark Antony attempts suicide, he's brought back to Alexandria, where he builds himself a hut at the foot of the Pharos where he can pout luxuriously and be a sack of useless. But Cleo isn't about to admit defeat. She throws some parties, partially to get Mark's spirits up, but also she ushers their oldest sons, 16-year-old Caesarion and 15-year-old Antyllus, Mark's son with our friend Fulvia, into adulthood. They enlist in the Egyptian army as a morale booster. They do everything they can to get the country feeling patriotic and ready to resist Octavian's inevitable invasion. On the flip side, Plutarch tells us, she and Mark also start a second club together. It's called the Companions to the Death. Cleopatra's goal, apparently, is to develop a poison that couples can use to perish together, and that won't be too painful a way to go.
Cleopatra was getting together collections of all sorts of deadly poisons,
Plutarch writes,
and she tested the painless working of each of them by giving them to prisoners under sentence of death. But when she saw that the speedy poisons enhanced the sharpness of death by the pain they caused, while the milder poisons were not quick, she made trial of venomous animals, watching with her own eyes as they were set upon another. She did this daily, tried them almost all.
Well, that's bleak. But you have to hand it to Cleopatra. In the midst of what must seem like insurmountable odds, deep disappointments, and growing dread, she never stops trying. Finally, with Octavian's forces growing larger and their options dwindling, Cleo and Mark both write letters to Octavian. He promises to kill himself if he'll just spare Cleopatra. She vows she'll step down as queen if he'll just leave her family alone. Octavian ignores Mark, but replies to Cleo, saying he'll be happy to oblige if she'll just murder Mark. But for all of her sibling throat-slashing and rash executions of rivals, when it comes to her ally, her lover, and the father of her children, she's just not willing to do that. She sends her oldest son, Caesarion, away for his safety, tucks the rest of her children into safe places with their trusted advisors, and starts building her own mausoleum. She fills it to the brim with jewels, gold, art, precious spices. In other words, the bulk of her personal riches. She also stocks it with a heaping pile of wood. If Octavian comes too close, she'll set it all on fire, and she tells him as much. And he is very lusty when it comes to getting his hands on her money. At last, Octavian and his forces arrive. How this part actually goes down is a big bundle of confusion in the sources. When Octavian sails to the city, it seems that Mark awakens from his woe-is-me stupor and actually gets off his keister to fight him, at least until his troops see the writing on the wall and start defecting. This too, of course, is Cleopatra's fault. One historian has Mark saying,
Cleopatra has betrayed me to the enemies I made for her sake.
Does she betray him to appease Octavian, hoping for clemency? We just don't know. But what must it be like for Cleopatra to see her enemy marching his troops into her city and knowing she's all out of cards to play? And what of her children, who Octavian is sure to want to get rid of? Her attendants rush to her mausoleum and seal themselves inside, leaving Mark behind. Cleopatra knows it's a fight neither of them is going to win. One ancient source has Cleo sending him a note falsely claiming she's dead, hoping to inspire him to commit suicide. In the ancient world, when you find yourself defeated, it's the courageous and noble way to go. Anyway, when Mark hears she's dead, he has nothing else to live for. He grabs his sword and stabs himself through the heart. Or he tries to. Instead, he misses and proceeds to bleed out slowly in what must be painful agony. Then he finds out Cleo's still alive somehow, and he either commands his servants to bring him to her or she gets hers to retrieve him. He's hoisted by rope in through the mausoleum's one window. He reaches for Cleo, they embrace, and he dies in her arms. Cleopatra reportedly smears his blood on her face, tears at her clothes, beats at her breast, in an Egyptian show of lamentation. Who knows how she feels in this moment, but she's lost the man who stood by her side for more than a decade, and she must know this is the beginning of the end. Octavian tries to coax her out of her mausoleum, She says she'll set it on fire without certain guarantees. One of his followers uses a ladder to get in through the window, and Octavian is quick to put her under house arrest. He allows her to bury Mark Antony's body, but otherwise, her ever-present guards spend their time making sure she doesn't commit suicide herself. Octavian wants to march this queen through the streets of Rome in chains. Cleopatra knows it, so she requests an audience with Octavian. One Roman writer has her looking pretty worse for wear and in terrible disarray, while another has her dressed to impress. Ever the savvy politician, she whips out all the love letters Julius Caesar once wrote her.
I mean, look how much he loved me,
she might have told him.
And I bore his son. That makes you and I practically related. You wouldn't kill your sort of stepmom, would you?
When that doesn't work, she either tries to seduce him, oh honey, or throws herself at his feet and begs for mercy. One account even has her clawing at his face. We have no way of knowing how this brilliant, brave, ever-adaptable woman may have tried to save herself and her children. Octavian's having none of it. He's going to march her through the streets of Rome, like Julius Caesar once did to her sister. Her children will probably die. Her dynasty will be lost forever. Octavian thinks he's finally bested Cleo, but she isn't about to be anyone's slave. And so she engineers one final plan. She asks Octavian for permission to give her final goodbyes to Mark Antony at his gravesite. Then, when she returns to her mausoleum with her two favorite ladies, she orders a bath to be prepared and enjoys one last meal. A basket of figs arrives, which is fully inspected. Then Cleo asks for a sealed letter to be taken to Octavian. Nothing major, just a little question is all. She closes the doors, gets herself dressed in her fanciest robes, and has her ladies tie on her favorite diadem. She's going to meet her maker as a queen. When Octavian opens the letter, in which Cleo asks to be buried with Mark Antony, he bursts into her chamber, only to find her dead on her golden couch. Her two most loyal ladies are beside her. One of them, Charmion, close to death. When a soldier yells something like, "What deed is this?" she offers these proud final words for her mistress.
It is indeed most fine and befitting the descendant of so many kings.
If you know anything about Cleopatra's legend, you'll have heard she killed herself by letting an asp, a poisonous snake, bite her breast. You'll see this image echoed in art throughout the centuries, but it seems pretty unlikely to be true. A snake bite wouldn't have guaranteed a swift or certain death in the time she had available. That fig basket probably couldn't have hidden a snake anyway. It's more likely she took poison. She was, after all, a master of it. Octavian is said to have been grudgingly impressed by her death. Even those who hated her had to admit that it's a distinguished and honorable way to go. At age 39, Cleopatra dies the last pharaoh of Egypt. But at least she got to outwit her captor and go on her own terms in her own style. She's buried alongside Mark in Alexandria. No one has ever found her tomb. Ancient Egypt as we know it is no longer. It's absorbed into the Roman Empire, never again to be what it was. Sadly, her son Caesarion is sought out and murdered. Her other kids, by contrast, are sent in another direction. They're adopted and raised by none other than Octavia, Mark Antony's long-suffering wife. These half-Egyptian royals are brought up in a good Roman house, surrounded, we can only hope, with some semblance of love. Later, one of the twins, Cleopatra Selene, will be married off to a king herself, who was also raised in Rome by strangers, Juba II of Mauritania. Together, they make a court that's full of art and sophistication. Their son, Ptolemy of Mauritania, will take the throne after his father leaves it. More than a decade into his reign, he's invited to Rome by Emperor Caligula. When Ptolemy sweeps into some gladiatorial games wearing a royal purple cloak, Caligula has him murdered. And thus, in typically dramatic style, Cleopatra's legend draws to its end. But her legacy will live on in greater infamy than perhaps any other woman in history. To find out more about the twists and turns that legacy took, go back and listen to the epilogue to the original series, featuring contributions from some of my favorite women's history podcasters. And with that, we let Cleo fade back into the pink mists of time. R.I.P., you incredible king. Until next time. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy The Exploress, tell a friend about it. Leave a rating and review wherever you listen. Buy something from the Exploress shop, become a patron. Really, there's so many ways to support the show, and they all make a massive difference. Thank you to my co-creator, Carly Quinn, for all of her help with the show. The music you just enjoyed comes courtesy of Derek and Brandon Fleischer, Keith Zizza, and Michael Levy. You'll find links to all their work in the show notes. Thank you to Josh Stackhouse for my theme music, Mr. Exploress for my logo, and to the following for their vocal stylings. Veronica, who played Cleopatra, Andrew, who played the strapping Mark Antony, Stephen, who played Octavian, Phil, who played Julius Caesar, my brother John, who played the Ptolemies and other assorted men, Mr. Exploress, aka Paul, Sean, who played Plutarch, and Avery, who played Cicero.
Yo, Cleo, Mark again. You got my text? It says here read, but I ain't hear from you. You must already be on your way. All right, I'll wait.